was that the country was never cleaner. Every bit of scrap, paper, steel, metal, everything else, were taken down and thrown over the fence into the scrap yards, and they were used for building the materials that helped us win the war. So when we talk about poor, I mean, we were a pretty good definition of what poor really meant in those days. And we've appreciated everything that's happened that got us a little bit further out of poor to this day. Another thing I want to bring up, you were a little bit startled when Ed told the story about all of the people praying and Graham and the insiders were hoping that Mike might die. And that was because Mike was not a very nice person. And as a matter of fact, Dad told a story about he'd line them up and he'd start asking them their homework. And he'd say, spell automobile. And then he comes down to Uncle Frank one day and he says, spell Flegum. And Frank says, what? Spell Flegum. Frank says, there is no Flegum. And he whacked off and he whacked Frank, and Frank went half across the room. And he said, there it is, P-H-L-A-G-E-M. And Frank says, that's phlegm. Bam! Don't tell me what it is. So Frank earned Uncle Mike earned a reputation as a pretty nasty guy at times. It carried on a bit to our father, and we've tried to tone it down a bit, but I don't know how we've ever done it. I remember one time Edward was very fast, and on this occasion he had to be fast. The chief said something, and Ed sassed him back. So the chief went to take a swing at Ed, and Ed jumped up and ran, and we had a screen door there, and he ran right through the screen. Boom! The screen's gone! And he jumped the fence and went over to Graham's house and about an hour later, we got a phone call, and it was him. And he says, is he gone back to work yet? Yeah, and Ed came back to the place.
Actually, what it was, remember, it was the tomato ketchup bottle.
Oh, the tomato, yeah.
Yeah, what happened is, I forget the meal, but Jim wanted the ketchup, and he got the ketchup, and John got the ketchup, and went, Teresa got the ketchup, went, and came to me, and when it got to the chief, there was not a lot of ketchup left. And he said, I take me oath. He said, down on the barges, that'd last a whole week. And I said, why the hell didn't you go down on the barges? And then it dawned on me what I said. And as he's getting up, I'm getting up. And I beat him to the door. But I didn't even, it just went right through the door, the screen and everything else. And so I was pleased when Graham said he'd gone back down to the docks.
You know, while you're talking about that, Ed, tell about the etiquette books.
Oh, yes. We'd be around the table, the seven of us, and for some reason I would always be sitting next to the chief. So they used to call me his pet.
Which you were.
Well, Jim says to John, toss me a piece of bread. And Jim made the mistake of tossing it. It's going in the air, the big paw comes out. Soon as you're through eating your mother's delicious meal, all of you get in a parlor, which was the so we finished our meal, we waltzed into the parlor, and he goes in, he had a little bookcase there. He opened it up and he threw a book at each one of us. Read that, I'm going to test you on it. Well, I got the book on marriage etiquette.
It was Emily Post etiquette books.
Etiquette. So I had to read it because I knew damn well he's going to ask us questions, which he did. He asked the question, and he would do stuff like that. I remember once we were home in the summertime with Joe Kilcummins. We're sitting in the living room, and he said, what are you guys doing? Oh, we're just hanging out. He says, go get a date and hang out. He said, hang out with the girls. Don't be hanging out in my parlor. he got mad at us one night. Joe Kilcummins was our friend. I think Joe ended up postmaster, didn't he, James?
Yeah, chief of police.
Or chief of police. And he got mad at us. And our bedroom was four bunks, and 2 bunks on each side, a closet, and one for the 4 of us in there. And what he would do, the chief, I lost my train of thought again.
I was going to say that bedroom of ours, if you opened the closet, you saw 3 suits and 27 baseball uniforms in there.
And ties, remember ties?
Oh, and a couple ties. And not that I guess we weren't too neat in there. They used to call it Guadalcanal. And it was a tough deal, but Ed kind of was the boss of the bedroom. And
well, I remember when I was thinking about Joe. See, all you got to do is say, I forgot it, and he'll start it out and you get it again. So he got mad at us for something. I forget what it was. And he said, all right, in there, into bed, all of you. So Joe Kilcummins is walking out the door. He said, where do you think you're going? Get in there. So Joe had to sleep over tonight on the floor in our bedroom because the chief wouldn't let him go home. He was mad at us all.
yeah, he was a little different. And he was about 5'8" and weighed about 270 at his strength time. And he later became the foreman on the docks down there. And one day, Mom made his lunch for him, so we took it down, and we're giving it to him, and we're walking along, and all of a sudden he said, damn it! And we said, what's the matter? He said, look at that barge. That barge is supposed to be over there where they're loading the coal on it, and the damn thing's sitting here. But the tug was supposed to bring it over. And the next thing he does, he takes that hawser off, which is about that thick, puts it over his shoulder, and he starts pulling. And after a little bit of time, that barge starts moving. Now he's pulling the barge, and he pulls it down to the next hawser and hooks it up down there. And Jim says, we better not make him mad today.
How about the time that he had to break the guy's arm and then to pick it?
Oh, he came home one night and called Mom Peg. And Peg said, Ed, how was it at work today? He said, Peg, you wouldn't believe it. He said, this guy came at me with a knife. And he said, I broke his arm. And he said, you can't believe the paperwork. And we said, we better not make him mad again today. I mean, oh, he was so strong, you know. And it was a time that, I mean, it was an education just living in our house because of the things he would do, which were kind of offbeat in some people's mind, but it was his way of instilling discipline into our lives, and hopefully a lot of that remained as we went along. Okay, Edward, I think we're at the time where we want to come to Seattle U. We decided we wouldn't be doctors and saved a lot of lives. We had been turned down by Honey Russell, and the significance of that, 4 years later we played for the College All-Stars against the Minneapolis Lakers and the New York Knickerbockers. Honey Russell was the coach of the College All-Stars, the fellow that had turned us down in New Jersey. But going even further back, he was the original coach of the original Boston Celtics, and Al Brightman played for Honey Russell at that time. So, you know, all these little things somewhat connected to one another. And somehow through all of this, we got to Seattle. And I guess some of you are pretty glad we got here, or you wouldn't be here. And Ed's going to tell you how that all started.
There was a national semi-pro baseball tournament held in Wichita, Kansas. It's still held to this day. And we had Lillian Briggs Chevrolet sponsored the South Amboy team. So it was our same group, it was a pretty good group of players. And we won the tournament in 48, 49, and 50. We were the state champions. Well, now it's 49 and we haven't got a place to go to college yet, but we win the state tourney again. So we get to go to Wichita, Kansas for the national tournament. Took a bus, rode from New Jersey to Wichita on a bus. It was a rather tough trip. So we get out there, and there was a three-way triangle that set this up. Al Brightman, the baseball and basketball coach at Seattle U, was playing for Mount Vernon Milkmaids, right up here.
And they didn't drink milk.
We were playing for South Amboy Briggs, the New Jersey state champion. And the third guy was a fellow named Bob Bilgrave. Now, Bob became the admissions director at Johns Hopkins University. But again, how fate hits it. Bilgrave and Brightman had been in service together. And so Bilgrave, unbeknownst to us, told Brightman to pick the two of us up. He said, pick those two guys up, they can play. So we played the tournament, and again, we ended up by fate. We played Mount Vernon in a 17-inning game, which we beat them 2-1. Well, about the 14th inning or so, I got on first base, and Brightman said to me, name's Al Brightman. I'd like to talk to you about coming to Seattle University. I still remember the words I said to him. Can't talk to you now, Coach. I just got the deal signed. I took off, or I don't know what happened. But anyway, that was the only conversation about coming to Seattle U. We got back home, and 2 weeks later, got a letter from Bill Fenton, who was the AD at Seattle U, offering us tuition and room. And that's how we got to Seattle U. And Mr. Fenton, everybody used to call him El Cheapo. When we first met him, he took us to breakfast with a $65 limit.
65 cent.
65-cent limit, yeah. $65 was the whole budget. And I think that the best one, there's two good stories on Willard. I'll get off the subject. It's it. John can tell you when we left South Amboy how we got out to Seattle. Bill was also the freshman coach. He was our freshman coach when we were playing. And you know, Seattle U doubles up on everything, basically. And we came out here, and when we were in high school, they used to give us sneakers. You know, the team. We made the team, we got a pair of sneakers. Didn't do it in college. Fenton did not give the team sneakers. So we used to play at the gym on campus as freshmen. And I got an old pair of sneakers on, black, and all of a sudden, I sweated a lot, so I ran right out of the shoes a lot. And Fenton hated me when they started giving shoes out. And I was we were going to play a freshman game in the gymnasium. I go down, and the flap on the bottom of my shoe is flapping it wrong. So I said to Bob Bianca, who was the manager, what am I going to do here? He says, well, I'll fix this. So he taped my shoe with white tape. So we go out for the game, and here I am in one white shoe and one black shoe. And all the people that, by this time we had filled the gym up all the time. They're all yelling, get the kid a pair of shoes, Fenton, you cheap bastard. And so he calls us in the next day, and he says, now you go down to Athletic Supply, and Mr. Ed Verbnick, ask for him, and he'll give you each a pair of shoes. But do not mention to the other players that you have the shoes. So we go down, meet Eddie Verbnick, who later became a great friend, and got a pair of shoes. We came in, and we were a little late for practice because we were down, and we came in, and John nearly killed Fenton. He walked in the door, and he says, look what Mr. Fenton brought us. And he showed his shoes up. And Fenton's down there with the shoes. So that started the fact that our freshman team got shoes. But the important part of the thing about it is we were leaving for Seattle with not a full ride. We didn't have a full ride, but I'll get to that a little later as soon as I tell you the worst one that Fenton pulled on me. Junior year. Now, all of a sudden they're flying us everywhere to speak to people and all this. We had our picture taken with every set of twins born in Seattle, I think, and so forth. And so I go upstairs and I wrote a postcard home. And I said, Mr. Fenton, do you have it? I need 2-cent postcard stamp. Oh yes, Edward, I do. Thank you. And I walk away. He says, that'll be 2 cents. I said, oh, I've
Luckily you had
only
it.
got a nickel. He says, I have change. Charge me 2 cents to send a postcard. Speaking of sending postcards, John in the junior year was the first player in history to score 1,000 points in one season. And it tells us how the chief thought at times. I called home. I'm talking to him and he said, how'd it go out there? I saw the scores, but I didn't see, what John got. I said, well, he got 34 in this game, 38 in this game, and 26 in this game. Good, good, good. I said, I had 40. He says, who the hell cares what you got? Get the ball to John.
And I agreed.
That was another thing we're playing. Something reminds you something, you got to pop it in there. We're playing some team, I don't know who it was. And we're not a team that ever scouted other teams. We just played our game, made them play. And we'll get into more to that. But we're playing this team, and because of John, who would play in the post, these other teams would back in on him at the beginning of the game. And then we'd loosen them up from outside by hitting outside shots. Well, we're about 5 minutes into this game, and we can't hit our hat. The four of us outside, we're missing every shot. Brenton calls timeout. We all get around him. He says, I want you guys to do something. He said, you four, not John. He says, look up in those stands. What do you see?
This is Brightman on the
Or
first.
Brightman, yeah. I said, what? He said, look up in those stands. He said, what do you see? He said, you see every seat full, don't you? He said, we have an All-American on this team, and they came to see him. They did not come to see you guys shooting the ball. Get the ball to John. And John goes, nice speech, Coach, nice speech. So the stuff that goes on, and we'd be playing a game, and we'd be playing the national anthem, we'd all be standing there, and Brian would go, Ed, you take 3. John, you take number 5. Wayne, take 11. That was the scouting report we had on, just what size they were before the game. And so, continue on, John. You're going to get us to Seattle.
With the scouting report, I'll jump ahead. When we went back to play NYU in the Madison Square Garden, we had never had a scouting report on anybody. Brightman says, to hell with them. Let them worry about us. We're not going to worry about them. We're back in Madison Square Garden, and before the game, Brightman says, I've done it. I've finally done it. He says, I got a scouting report. He said, I paid $50. He said, and we're going to find all out about NYU before this game starts. So the door opens, and in comes this very small Jewish person. As a matter of fact, he looked a lot like Abe Saperstein. And he said, gentlemen, I'm here to tell you about NYU. He says, they got a center named Boris Neshampian. He says, Boris don't know that God gave him a left hand. He's everything with the right hand. So Brightman says, Wayne, check him to the right. He says, they got a kid named Weiss. He says, he must be related to the coach, because he can't run, he can't shoot, he can't do nothing. Brightman says, John, that's your man. And he goes through this whole thing. We go out to start the game. We get a bucket, they go down, they get the ball in their champion, he throws the nicest left-handed hook shot you fly. I got this kid Weiss, and he's running all over the joint, and I finally said, Ed, you take him, I'll take yours. We got conned. And Brightman is hot. We're still up ahead at the half. And Brightman comes in and he hits the door with his fist, and the door is rattling like that. And he's madder than hell about losing the $50. And the door opens, and in comes this little guy again. And they says, and now for the second half. Brightman grabbed him by the seat of the pants and threw him right through the door. So we had one scouting report in the whole history of our time at Seattle U, and it proved out to be bonus. And again, another thought, jumping ahead, Ed talked about his shoes. We had those Converse shoes in those days. They were kind of, and Ed had a habit, he sweat so much, he would actually run out of the sole of the shoe. So we're down playing the University of San Francisco, and Casey Jones is guarding Ed, and Ed fakes him and goes around him, and the bottom of Ed's shoe comes flying off. Well, Ed goes in, makes the layup. Brightman gets up and yells, Ray, Sue. So Ray goes up and gets out. He said, no, take your shoe off, throw it out to Ed. And so Sue had to throw his shoe. We never even called a timeout. Ed changed the shoe. And what do you think Sue's chances of getting in the game were? Sitting there with one shoe on, one shoe off during that game.
Yeah, they just threw the shoe to me out on the floor. And so I'm guarding the guy and unlaced it, laced it back up, and just got in the ball game.
The only time I ever guarded two men.
Speaking of guarding two men, we're playing Whitworth.
Whitworth. Incidentally, Whitworth at that time had the tallest team in the country. They had 7 feet, 6'11", 6'10", 6'5", 6'5". They were the tallest college team in the country at the time. We kicked their butt both times, but it's good. McGregor was the coach.
Oh, McGregor, he said, well, we played him in Seattle and we beat him and we zoned him. And when they went over there, they expected to be zoned again. So Brightman says, we're going to do a fake zone on him. He said, we're going to be set up like it's a zone. He said, but the 3 guys inside are playing man for man. Now he said, outside, John is going to guard nobody.
I agreed to this.
We said, what do you want? He said, Ed, you're going to be out front and you're going to take both men, just looking like it's a zone. And he said, so I never forget about partway in the third quarter, one of the guys scored, and John says to me, get moving, go. One of my guys is scoring. But
what happened?
We fooled them. They played a zone offense the whole game, thinking we were in a zone, and we were in a man-for-man, actually.
And with about 3 minutes to go in the game, we were about 30 points ahead. And Brightman, there was a timeout, and Brightman would never let us call a timeout. We had to run and force the other team to call the timeouts. That Woodward called a timeout, and Brightman left our huddle and went down into theirs. And he said, McGregor, he said, let me tell you something. He said, we're not in a zone. He says, we're man-to-man on the back line. Ed's running around chasing 2 people. John's doing nothing. He said, now, how about for at least for 3 minutes giving us a game? And he walked out of the huddle.
Oh, Brightman was tough. We had a practice, and our practices were short, about an hour and a half. He never sat down, and he always started them off with 20 minutes of one-on-one. We had 12 players or so he'd have 6 at each end, 1 up front, 1 on the wing, 1 on the wing. And it was no holds barred. You had to guard that guy, and we got accused of, against Wyoming, of beating them up, and they were about a head taller on every one of us. But and he'd finish every practice from the beginning of the school year or the season. Every time he did it, he would stand in the middle of the floor at the end of practice, put a chair at each corner so he couldn't cut it short, and make us run the gym 25 times before we finished. And he'd stand, and the worst part is he'd stand right at midcourt and go, 24 to go, 23 to go, 22 to go. But he never, to the last day, he did it.
And the significance of things that happen, which gets back into things. Al Brightman would have never been the coach of Seattle University except for an accident in the Army. He was in the service, and at the time, he was the number 2 rated catcher in the Cleveland Indian organization, ahead of Jim Hagan and all of those guys. And during the service, during a maneuver, he fell in a trench, and the bayonet stuck in the ground, and the butt of the rifle hit his shoulder, and they had to take a bone out of his shoulder, and he was never able to throw after that, and that ended his career. And so he hunted around and found a job as the coach at Seattle University, or he would have never wound up finding us. So all these little things happen. But before all these little things happened, we had to get to Seattle U. You know, probably.
I gotta tell this one before.
Oh, this is before we get to Seattle U, I think.
No, it isn't.
Oh,
It's just a story on private that we hadn't written down in our little notes here. We, Father Bob Carmody was the traveling priest with the team. And he was an English professor of Shakespeare. We had him on the list, do not put the players in his class. Tough teacher, but a wonderful, wonderful man. And he was with us, we were over playing Seattle Pacific down at the canal down there, the little school by the canal. It was the opening of the Royal Brome Gym, their gymnasium. Now this was supposed to be a game, a snap for us. At halftime, we're 2 points behind. So we know we're going to get it. And they had, you go down the stairs and off to the left, they didn't have a locker room as such, they just had a locker area. So we go down there and we're waiting for Brightman to come down. So he starts down the stairs, and next thing you know, he starts hollering at us, swearing at us, just blasting us. And we're just taking it because we know. But what he did before that, he switched all the lights off. So we're in the dark while he's screaming at us. And all of a sudden the light goes on, and it's Father Carmody. He says, if anyone needs prayers, I'll be upstairs. Turn the light out, and then he turned the light out, and Brightman finished blasting us. And then what he said to us, if we don't win this game by 20 points, leave your uniform on, we are going up to the gym for a full practice. And we're one behind at half. We won by 3. We won, 3, we beat the spread, as they say. But we'd have been up there.
another Brightman story goes to baseball. We're up in central Ellensburg, where we're up there, and we're playing, I think, Western. We play them a doubleheader in baseball, and we beat them 21-0 and 21-1. So at that time, Ed and I didn't drink. We caught up later. And so all the guys are over in the tavern across from the Webster Hotel, and Ed and I are sitting in the lobby, and all of a sudden, all hell breaks loose. And all these fights are going on, and our whole team's involved in the fights. And here you can hear the police siren coming and all of that, and so all the guys come running over into our place, except Pidge, the bus driver. The cops nail him climbing out a window. So Brightman said, okay, he says, I'll call down there, and he said, we need $50 to get bail for Pidge. Everybody emptied their pockets. So totally we had about $28 total, the whole team between us. And he says, well, that ain't gonna do it. He said, I got an idea. He says, I'll get it from Carmody, Father Carmody. So Hal goes upstairs, he knocks on the door, and Father opens the door, and he says, Father, he says, we beat the town team pretty bad today, and he said, so he says, we got in a little scuffle, and we need $50 to get Pidge out of jail. And Father Carmody said, well, Al, you know baseball's not a revenue-producing sport, and he's going through all that. And he says, Father, he said, just relax a minute. He said, let me tell you what actually happened. He said, we beat the town team quite badly today. He said, and they weren't happy about it. Neither were their fans. He said, we were across the street having a beer, being gentlemen, like we always are. And he said, the townspeople were really honest. He said, Father, but you'd have been proud of us. You'd have been proud of us. He said, we held our own. He said, but Father, I got to tell you something. When they started attacking Catholicism, we had to go after them. Next thing, we got the $50, we Pidge out of jail, and we come home in the bus. And, Brightman was something else. Again, in baseball, we used to play at Broadway Field. And Ed and I and Brightman used to nail these balls over the left field fence and hit Arnold Manning's funeral parlor. And one day Arnold had enough of it. He comes across screaming, "Brightman, you and Elmo Bryan's got to quit hitting my funeral parlor." And Brightman carefully said, "Who are we disturbing?" but what's his name? Arnold had enough juice to get the fence heightened by 20 feet. So instead of holding the bat like that, we just took it like that, and we still got to his funeral parlor. But that was but all of this again doesn't happen till we get here, and
Yeah, you know, it was a long trip from New
and
Jersey.
it ain't going to happen yet. So when we got that letter, the chief never drove. Even when we signed with the Pirates and gave him a car, he had Teresa drive. And so we're coming up to the airport, to LaGuardia Airport. Uncle Frank's driving, and Tubbs and Ed and I are in the back seat. And he turns around and he says, "See that?" He said, "I got more common sense in that little finger than you're going to get in 4 years education. If you're not going to combine the two of them together," he said, "turn this car around." We said, "Let's go to LaGuardia Airport." So we flew northwest, and we had to change planes in Chicago, and this is the first time we'd ever flown. So we're flying out from Chicago to Seattle, and the co-pilot came back, and he must have looked at the two of us like this, and he said, so he sat down and had a nice long chat with us, a real nice person. And a number of years later, he was the pilot of the Northwest plane that disappeared over Lake Union, or Lake Michigan, that they never ever found a part of. But a wonderful guy, and we got to Seattle at midnight. Got off of the plane, nobody there to meet us. We didn't know a single person in Seattle. We had our luggage, and we had one suitcase full of boots and galoshes and overcoats, because we thought the snow was 4 feet high out here all the time, stuff like that. So we sat in the airport all night. It'd sleep for an hour, and I'd watch the bags, and vice versa.
I don't know why we'd been better off somebody stole them.
So we grab a bus downtown, and we're down on 1st or 2nd Avenue, and we don't know what to do next. So a bus comes by, and we said to the bus driver, Ed did, he carried the conversation in those days. He said, "Do you go by Seattle University?" And this bus driver says, "Yeah." He said, "I think I go by that place." So we started, oh boy, what are we into? So he drops us right at Madison Avenue, across from the IHOP, we're to enter Seattle U. And we go in there, we got these suitcases, and we're standing there. It's about 7:45 in the morning. And this priest comes around the corner. And he comes up to us and he said, "You're not the O'Briens." And we said, "Yes, Father, we are." And he said, "Oh my God." And he turned and left. And we thought that was a hell of an introduction to the city of Seattle, I might add. And he comes back with the beloved Fenton. And Fenton says, "You're not the O'Briens." And we said, "Yes, we are." Though we were getting a little down at this time. And so Fenton says, "Well, why don't we go over to the gymnasium and have a workout?" So Ed said, "Fine, Mr. Benton." I remember he called him Benton. He said, "But who are we going to work out at 7:45 in the morning?" And that's when Fenton said, "Oh, yes." He said, "That's a strong point." He said, "What we'll do, we'll take you to our Veterans Hall, and we'll, after we have a breakfast at the Chieftain, and then we will have a workout at noon, and we'll house you in our Veterans Hall." So we go to the breakfast, and as Ed said before, Fenton says there's a 65-cent limit on breakfast, which wasn't bad in those days. You get a couple of eggs and some. So they take us over to the Vets Hall, put us in a room, 2 bunk beds, 2 tables, nothing else, no sheets, pillowcase or anything. So we conk out, and about 11:45, boom, boom, boom. They're waiting for you over in the gym. So we're going over to the gym, and Ed says, "I don't think we ought to hold anything back in this practice." And so we get in there, and they give us uniforms, and we come out, and there was about 100 people up in the balcony. And they says, "What the hell is this?" I said, "I don't know." And did you ever feel like you got a target right on your back? They're all looking at us. And so Ed said, "Let's put our dog and pony show on." So I loosened up, he said, "You ready?" I said, "Give me another minute." So I walked in, I got under the basket, and I jumped up, and I grabbed the rim, and I chinned myself. And I dropped down. Now you hear all this rumbling going on up above. So I do it again. And then I go back, and Ed takes the ball, dribbles in, and dunks it. Now here comes Fenton down the stairs. Very impressive. He said, "But I would appreciate it if you don't hang on the rim, you might break the rim." And Ed said, "When they're worried about us breaking the rim, I think we're going to be all right." Which turned out to be true, but Mr. Brightman happened to disappear. Didn't show up for 3 days. And when he finally did, we got talking to him, and he says, "I took a gamble on you guys, and you got to help me, right?" And I said, "We'll be all right." And I said, "What was your gamble?" And he said, "Well, when I got your scholarship, they asked how big you guys were." And I said, "Oh, they're 6'3" or 6'4", somewhere there. And they're waiting for these two big studs out of New Jersey come out, and these two shrimps showed up. But it turned out all right.
Yeah, because we were 90 wins, 17 losses in basketball, and 62 wins, 14 losses in baseball. So we were 152-31 in all of the games we played out here for Seattle.
And Ed talked about playing on the freshman team. And in those days, you had to play on the freshman team, and then you could play only 3 years of varsity ball. And there was no three-point shot. And so it was a lot different, but even in those days, we averaged 90 points a game. Because we just ran like banshees and shot the ball extremely well. I think in Ed's junior year and senior year, in the junior year, I believe he had the #1 accuracy shooting in the United States of America. And in the senior year, he was second. And I was in the top 5 both years. So our team, we could really shoot the ball, and that was terribly important. And the other thing is, Brightman was very, very attuned to not turning the ball over. So, and if you dribbled the ball in back court, you were about to come out of the game. That ball was out, boom, and it was up there. And we tried to get a 3-on-2 and a 2-on-1, which was to the benefit, rather than dribbling that ball up, which lets the defense get set. And so that was kind of the general attitude of what happened in those days. And we did very well in our sophomore year. I forget what the record was, but we went to the National Catholic Invitation Tournament in New York. And the chief came up for that. And we lost in the finals to St. Francis of Pennsylvania. And in one of the games, I got 45 points, and that was the record for that particular tournament. And it kind of, by being in the East, they started to take notice of the basketball that was getting played in the West. It was, they didn't pay much attention before that. And then when we were juniors, and we'll go back and forth here, we played in the NIT, National Invitation Tournament in Madison Square Garden, and there were 5,000 people there from our hometown, and they all had green hats on, and we played Holy Cross, and we should have won the game, but we got beat at the end. Now, here's our dad, 5'8", 270 pounds, in the middle of Madison Square Garden, the middle of mid-court, chewing me out and Ed out for embarrassing him in front of all of his friends. And we're standing there, and the cops come to get him, and Ned Irish, who ran in Madison Square Garden, held the cops up. So we stood there getting our butt chewed out for 5 minutes while he held up the second game and everything else. Then we were supposed to go to Denny Moore's for dinner, and he said, "We ain't going to Denny's, the hell with the two of you." And he took off and went back to Southampton. So we never got to Denny's. Well, the next year we came back.
Oh, that's the next year.
To play NYU. And this is a picture that was taken after the game. As you can see, we looked a little bit younger, had the darker colored hair, and we played NYU. And I told you about the scouting report, but we still wound up winning the game 102-101. And that was the first time in the history of Madison Square Garden that two college teams had both gone over the 100 in a deal. The game ends. Where is the chief? 5'8", 270 pounds, the middle of Madison Square Garden at midcourt, and he says to us, "That's a little better." He said, "When you're through talking to those press turkeys, then we'll go to dinner at Dinty Moore's," which we did. So he had a formula. It was win or else. And so we were delighted to have the opportunity to do that. I'll put this back in. You want to say something? Anyway.
And tell them how you got a meal ticket, Father Lemieux.
Oh, well, okay, that's another Seattle story. As we mentioned, we only had room and board, so we didn't have room and board, room and tuition. And we used to work jobs. We'd sweep out the gymnasium for some money and stuff like that. And we'd work at a clothing company on Saturdays and so forth. And now it's a junior year, and we still don't have a full ride. So John comes up with a brilliant idea. There was if you're familiar with the campus where the new church is over there, that's right where the gymnasium was. And right next to it was a barracks, an army barracks, and that's where we were in. And Jim Hill, John, and myself used to eat lunch together. We get the day-old bakery stuff and so forth. So John comes up with an idea. He says, "Let's invite the president to lunch." So we invite Father Lemieux, who became a friend now after he liked to win, and he's seeing things happening.
And at the moment we did this, we had 17 straight wins, so we thought we were in good shape.
So we get him to come over, and sure enough, we got a little tablecloth on a little bench there. And
It was a sheet.
yeah, three. That reminded me of the time I knocked you through the wall.
Oh, yeah. I went through that wall pretty good.
We've had one fight in our life. One. I had cleaned up the room, and it was nice and clean. I was very happy with myself. He comes in, he throws his coat on the bunk bed. I said, "Pick that up and hang it up." "Oh, it's my bed. I'll get on anything I want." I said, "Pick that thing up and hang it up. Make me." You know. So we went at it, and I got lucky. I got a good grip, and I threw him. They had the plasterboard wall thing. Threw him right through it. That's how bad the barracks were.
In the Skip Kitzman's room.
In the Skip Kitzman. And the rest of the year we had a sheet separating the two rooms. But the thing about it was, after I threw him through, he gets up and he's coming around back. I open the door ready to go again. He says, "Hi, Ed, came by to help you clean up the room."
All right, continue on the lunch with Father Lemieux.
Oh, so we put on our best dog. We got a bowl of Campbell's soup. We got a tuna fish sandwich.
And the Langendorf buns.
And the Langendorf buns.
Two-day-old
for
buns.
dessert, 2-day buns. So we sit down, the president comes in, and he's all happy to, we're visiting. And as the conversation goes on, he said, "Do you boys eat like this all the time?" And then John came up with another beauty. He said, "No, Father," he says, "we're putting the dog on for you." The next day we had eating privileges in the cafeteria.
You got to use your knee every now and then. But it was a great time, and we were called the United Nations team. We had Ray Su, who was Chinese. We had Wayne Sanford, who was black. Ray Muscatel, who was Jewish. We were Irish.
Johnson out of Canada, Canadian.
Yeah, had Canadian. They called us the All Nations team when we were back in New York, and everybody got along fine with one another. It was good stuff. Even though most of our practices ended with a fight, we'd bat one another around and watch the fight start, and then Brightman say, "All right, that's enough for today." Start the running and stuff like that. But as we were going along, we were doing well. We were starting to get some notoriety. And then a game came up, and I preface it by saying there were two games that helped Seattle University gain national recognition. And they were the NYU game back in New York, in Madison Square Garden, and the Globetrotter game, which was January the 21st of 1952. And those two games, very few people saw both games, except Gene O'Brien, who was back in Boston at the time and was at the NYU game, and who, of course, was at the Globetrotter game out here. She was one of the few people that saw both games. Well, how that came about, we were doing well, and it was 1952, and that was an Olympic year. And Royal Brome decided that he was going to do something to help the basketball Olympics. So he got together with Abe Saperstein, who was the owner of the Globetrotters, and they went to the NCAA and proposed 3 games to be played with all the funds raised going to the 1952 Basketball Olympics. And they proposed the 3 games would be Washington here in the state of Seattle, out here, Notre Dame in the Midwest, and Army in the East. And they put this whole thing together with 2 exceptions. Number 1, there were 2 balls used in the game. One was a college ball, which is this ball right here, and the other was a pro ball. Now the difference was the pro ball has a little, at that time, had a little wider seam. It was a little easier to palm a pro ball. That was the one thing, and the second one was they were allowed 6 fouls. And in that game, Bill Hagelin fouled out, our fellow that jumped center for us. And to this day, he's the only person in the history of the NCAA who has fouled out with legitimately 6 fouls called on him. So that was the deal. Now, Brome had a habit of doing all this stuff and not telling anybody about it. He neglected to tell the University of Washington that they were going to play the Globetrotters, and he neglected to tell them that the game was going to take place at Heg Edmondson Pavilion. So he then goes and sells the tickets, sold out in 24 hours. Boom, it was sold out. He then calls Harvey Castle, who was the GM of the University of Washington, and Castle is livid that Brome had done this and hadn't even contacted him. And so they get that ironed out, and then Brome goes to the union and gets all the union person to donate their time. And he's got this whole thing arranged. Then he calls Tippy Dye, the coach of the University of Washington, and tells him that he's playing the Globetrotters on Monday night. And Tippy Dye told him to go to hell. He said, we're not going to get embarrassed by the Globetrotters, we're not playing them. So Brome was stuck. He called Seattle U. Brightman answered the phone, and Brome said, kid. Brightman called everyone kid. He said, I got the Globetrotters in town Monday night. He says, will you play them? And Brightman said, what time? And that's how the game stood there. It would have never happened if the UW had played them. So we played that Friday night, beat somebody, and Brightman said, we're going to practice Saturday and Sunday. And we never practiced on a Sunday. And so we come out there, and he said, I've added another game to the schedule. He said, we're playing the Harlem Globetrotters Monday night. And he said, don't get too concerned about this. I know how we can beat them. That was not totally convincing, does it, the point? And he said, and as Ed has repeated many times, and I'll let you repeat it, Ed.
Okay, he said 2 things about the Globetrotters. He said, number 1, they're straight man-to-man. They never play zone. He said, so John's going to have a field day. He said, the second thing is, Goose Tatum gets all of the publicity, but they're a great outside shooting team. And he said, what I really want you to do is the 4 of you guys, he always kind of referred to John and the 4 of us. He said, so I want the 4 guys guarding their guards and forwards to hang on top of them. He said, just stay right on top of them. And I will use Wayne Sanford and Bill Hagelin to double up on, not at the same time, but to back each other up on Tatum. And it worked to a T. We came out, we started the game, John made a left-hand hook, he made a right-hand hook. Now before you knew it, it was 9-2. And then we just went back and forth. I hit a set shot from midcourt at halftime to give us a 6 point lead. And then it was just back and forth the whole game. But,
Well, what happened? Go ahead, Ed.
there was a halftime. There was a start of the game and there was a halftime. At the start of the game, they brought this gal out to throw up the first ball.
Oh! The movie actress Joan Caulfield, who was in a dress that I don't know how she got into to this day. And she comes out, Pop Haggerty got the ball, Pop threw it up, and nobody moved. All 10 of us were like this. And Pop grabbed the ball and he said, "Gentlemen, if you're ready to play basketball." So she walked off the court and 10 sets of eyeballs went like this. All of it was right up the top.
And the second set at halftime, we had a good sized lead, 6-8 points, something like that. And if you got it right there, oops, no, hands aren't any good. I'll show you. This is Bill Fenton.
Got a cheap suit on.
This is Al Brightman. This is me with the knee brace on. Here's John. Here's Abe Saperstein here. And here's Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong was the halftime event. And he and Thelma Middleton sang "Baby It's Cold Outside" and just brought the house down. But we're standing back there now waiting to go out for the second, and Brightman's mad. They're out there doing all this entertainment. We got the lead. He wants to get back out there. And every time they'd start a song up, Brightman would get mad. We finally got out there and got the thing done. But he came up to campus to present us with an award, Armstrong, the following day, and that's the picture that was taken right there.
What happened, Louis Armstrong was playing at the Palomar Theater at that time, and he knew about the game. So at the intermission, he decided to come up and look a little bit. And he got so enamored with the game, he stayed for the entire second half and held the show at the Palomar up for a whole hour. And the next day, Rod Belcher interviewed Louis Armstrong. And Belcher said, "Louis, what do you think of Johnny O'Brien?" And Louis Armstrong said, "Man," he said, "that guy is a living aspirin." To this day, I don't know what the hell he meant by that, but that's what he said. But when the place was sold out, totally, right now. And the rumble is that the announced attendance was 12,500. It was the biggest crowd ever that day. The rumble was there were over 15,000 people in the building. And the fire department made them shut the doors, and there were about 5,000 people outside. They hooked up microphones on, and it was a very cold winter night. And Brightman, we had practiced and done what Brightman said we should do. And we come out, and we're standing here, and the Globetrotters are over here. The court is over here, and we're waiting, and Abe Saperstein, who you just saw there, comes walking along, and he looks at us and he says, "Is this all you got?" This is when we won the ball game, right there. And Higlin patted him on the head and he said, "Get your butt out of here, we'll show you." And we got mad. And I think that was a large part of us going out there and saying, because when we went out, the Globetrotters had circled midcourt and they were doing their fancy stuff, and we wanted them to get rid of that so we could get the old ball game started and stuff like that. And we told you about the start of the game, and first time down, I threw in a right-handed hook shot, and the second time down I threw in a left-handed hook shot, and the third time I threw in a jump shot. And that's what I would usually do in a game to get the defensive guy confused, because he didn't know what the heck I was going to do. And so anyway, all of a sudden, people had been waiting to see them doing their fancy stuff, and they were never allowed to do it in the whole game. And like Ed said, he had a set shot from midcourt, which would have been probably a 4-pointer today. And we were ahead by 10 points at the half. And we came out for the second half. They got hot and caught us. And it never went a point or two more back and forth. And there was a rumble that it was such an exciting game that in the fourth quarter, Royal Brome was standing on top of the press table. And he was so nervous and he was yelling and screaming the whole fourth quarter. But if I can digress for just a second, I'll tell you something that happened on this. This is a picture of Goose Tatum and me. I'm the little guy. Goose is the big guy. This was an 84-inch wing spread. And to see the size of his hands. And so this was in the fourth quarter. And I've got the ball, as you can see. I'm in the 3-second zone. My foot's in there, and I've already dribbled. And I'm trying to get rid of the ball. Look, everybody's covered. So I threw my head back like that and went down. The Goose did this. This is my favorite basketball picture. And I had to get rid of the ball. So I saw the edge of the rim up there. And with my left hand, I took that ball there. And I just flicked it like that. And it was like the Rocky movie. Time stood still. And this ball kind of floats up and it goes in. And I'm running down the court. Here comes the Goose, and he says, "Hey, little white boy, knock that crap off. That's my shot." And I start laughing, and the Goose starts laughing, and they're yelling, "Get your man! Get your man!" So Ed had a habit of yelling that at me. But anyway, what happened, we got ahead, we were ahead 83-81 with 2 seconds to go in the game. And the Globetrotters called timeout. Well, that happened to be their 6th timeout, and it was a technical foul. So we of course then had a little time, and Brightman said, set up the inbounds play, and all we got to do is get it in, and we got this game won. So I shot the technical, and it bounced around and went in, and it was like a collective sigh went out of the whole building. And so Moscatel took the ball out of bounds. Ed and I cut off of one another. Glasky went deep. Glasky blocked for Doherty. And Doherty, Moscatel threw the ball to Doherty. The gun went off. Doherty threw the ball a million miles in the air, and the court was just full of people. You couldn't move, couldn't get off of the court. And finally, it must have taken forever to get off of the court, and everybody was happy and all that. And the game ended. And the interesting thing, in the way Brightman approached things, the next day we had practice, he never once mentioned the Globetrotter game. It was the next team we were going to play. Never said a word about the Globetrotter game. And of course, the papers were full of it and all of that stuff. And so I think that the significance of that game and the NYU game were the two things that identified basketball in the Pacific Northwest as pretty heady basketball and as complementary as it was in the East. And so there was a lot more identification with basketball on the West Coast than there had been before.